A few motorists later reported seeing him still waiting under the overpass board, maybe drawing in the dirt with a stick, others said. One woman remembered a man standing a few feet behind him, leaning against the concrete wall. He had a weathered face, a dark jacket, and a tattoo peeking out from his sleeve. She didn't think much of it then. By 2:08 p.m., Nathan was gone. Back at home, Susan Miller was baking cookies when she glanced at the clock. He should be home by now, she murmured to herself. John returned from a hardware run and found her pacing by the window. Give him another half hour, John said. You know Nathan, he probably got distracted. But half an hour turned into an hour, then 2. They called his cell. No answer. By 4:30 p.m., Susan drove to the bus stop. Nathan was nowhere in sight. She asked around, no one had seen him. She even spotted the broken-down bus being towed. Her heart pounded. Something felt off. Divers checked the retention pond behind a gas station. Hundreds of volunteers, many strangers, joined in the search. It was as if the entire community had woken from a collective dream that their safe little world could crack. Detectives pulled surveillance from the surrounding businesses. They saw Nathan at 1:14 p.m. walking toward the overpass. Then, nothing. The man described by the witness couldn't be clearly identified. The footage was too grainy. By the end of the first month, there was still no trace of Nathan. But one thing was clear, the Millers weren't giving up. On January 15th, standing outside the local courthouse at a press conference, Susan gripped the podium. To whoever has Nathan, she said, her voice steady but tight, we forgive you. Just bring him home. And to every parent out there, hold your child tighter tonight. Because in one moment, everything can change. That man leaning behind Nathan, who was he, Susan and John Miller, barely spoke to each other except to organize search groups or field phone calls. Their once cozy home was now command central boxes of missing posters stacked in the kitchen, reporters ringing the doorbell, neighbors dropping off casseroles that went untouched. Tips continued to pour in. Some credible, most weren't. A boy in Tallahassee looked like Nathan, it wasn't him. He hadn't left his room since the candlelight vigil. He's just out there, he told his mother, eyes fixed on the driveway. Somewhere. His parents didn't have the heart to disagree. Meanwhile, Detective Taylor kept a close eye on every known sex offender in a 50-mile radius. One name kept surfacing, a man named Brett Cowan. He'd lived in the area for years, had priors from another state, and a vague alibi. He's weird, a neighbor said, but weird don't make him guilty. Still, Taylor made a note. The community organized what they called the Walk for Nathan. Over 200 people showed up. Families wore red in his honor. Speakers took turns at the mic sharing stories about Nathan. He always opened doors for the elderly, one woman said. I didn't even know his name until now. A GoFundMe page raised over $150,000 in less than a week. It wasn't just the arrival of another gray January morning, it was heavier than that. Like everyone was holding their breath at once. Since Nathan's backpack had been found near State Road 24, the town's tone shifted from grief to something sharper. Determination, fury, a readiness to act. Detective Bruce Taylor stood at the edge of the logging road where the backpack was recovered. He wore a pilled wool coat and carried a notebook filled with scribbles and sticky notes. It was quiet out here, deceptively peaceful. Just woods and brush, a few scattered beer cans, and a sense that something terrible had happened here. Someone brought him out here, Taylor said to Officer Lynn as they combed the area. Then they got spooked. Maybe something went wrong. Lynn nodded. They left him alive. Taylor didn't answer. Back in town, community efforts were growing stronger. 2 retired Marines had joined the volunteer coordination team. They organized grid searches like military ops, even creating laminated maps for every zone. The local VFW offered space as headquarters. School was still in session, but some teachers were letting kids out early to join family searches. The Miller house became a different kind of battlefield. Susan stopped answering reporters' calls. John, once a quiet man, now stood outside every day with Nathan's photo on a sandwich board strapped to his chest. He walked from the gas station to the post office and back, 10 miles every day. Inside, Ellie would sit on the couch with Nathan's video games untouched beside her. She still didn't understand. Mommy, she'd whispered one night, did he go to heaven to get my Christmas gift? Susan couldn't answer. That weekend, Gainesville held a community town hall. Hundreds packed into the school gymnasium. Some came to help, others came to vent. We need checkpoints. Roadblocks, one man shouted. Somebody out there took a child. What about that tattoo, a woman added. What does that even mean? Detective Taylor stepped forward, holding up his hands. We're following every lead, but we need your help. Stay alert. Talk to your neighbors. Check your security cameras. Report anything strange, no matter how small. A hand rose from the back. It was Jordan's mother. Her voice trembled. I don't want this town to become a place of fear. But I also don't want to wait until it happens again. A murmur swept through the crowd. That night, a new group quietly formed on Facebook, the Watchers of Gainesville. A mix of off-duty cops, veterans, tech workers, and stay-at-home moms. They created a live neighborhood map, cross-referencing every abandoned building, storage unit, motel, and roadside rest stop. Volunteers worked in shifts. Drones were donated. Some set up wildlife cams in areas around the woods. By the next morning, several homes had been visited by police thanks to watcher tips. One of them stood out. It was a yellow-paneled house at the edge of Hawthorne, half sunken behind overgrown hedges. Neighbors had reported it as empty, but cameras showed lights flickering inside at night. A local contractor, recalled doing plumbing work there 5 years ago, said the basement door led to a space that felt wrong. Detective Taylor obtained a warrant. They entered on Tuesday morning. Dust clung to the air like fog. A foul, mildewed stench greeted them inside. Cans of ravioli and stale water bottles lined the counters. The furniture was rotting. No signs of anyone living there recently, except one. In the basement, nailed to the wall, was a printed photo of Nathan. The room went silent. Taped to it in shaky handwriting were the words, "He wasn't supposed to be there." Yeah. Shana, back at Police HQ, the incident reignited every investigative instinct in Taylor's body. This wasn't random anymore. It was deliberate, personal, and whoever had read in those words had returned to that house recently. The watchers worked overnight to triangulate traffic camera data, scrape online forums, and reach out to former tenants of the Yellow House. One woman responded she remembered the man who lived there, quiet, odd, heavily tattooed, and always watching kids at the park a little too long. His name was Russell Dean Holloway, and he was back in Gainesville. The morning Russell Dean Holloway's name appeared in Detective Taylor's file, the sun hadn't yet risen over Gainesville. But in the war room of the police station, the day had already begun. Holloway's mugshot was pinned to the center of the whiteboard, a man in his early 40s, deep-set eyes, shaved head, and a serpent tattoo curling around his neck. Holloway had slipped through the cracks before. 3 arrests for child endangerment, 2 dropped for lack of evidence, 1 dismissed after the witness recanted. He moved off and drifting between counties like a ghost until Gainesville. Detective Taylor reviewed Holloway's file with Assistant DA Claire Mendoza. He fits the profile, Taylor said. Tattoo matches the gas station video. Lived in that yellow house. No alibi for the 17th. But no forensic evidence, Mendoza reminded. No DNA. No fingerprints. He left a message, Claire. That handwriting matched a note found in his prior arrest from '09. That won't hold in court, she said. You need something solid. Taylor was already 3 steps ahead. He dispatched officers to Holloway's last known address, a month-to-month rental above a mechanic shop downtown. But the apartment was empty. Holloway was gone. The landlord said he'd paid cash and left mid-December, just 2 blocks from the bus stop. Later that afternoon, Gainesville High held an assembly. A guest speaker from the state's child safety program had come to address the older students. For Nathan's classmates, it was too late. Jordan sat alone, slouched in the back. He hadn't spoken much in weeks. Teachers worried about him. So did his parents. He wore Nathan's favorite hoodie, red oversized, and kept checking the exits. As the speaker clicked through slides about trusted adults and being alert, Jordan's eyes flicked to the auditorium doors. That's when he saw him, a man standing in the hallway, not part of the school staff, not with a clipboard or badge, just watching, expressionless. His eyes met Jordan's for a split second, and then the man turned and walked away. Jordan stood up. Sit down, a teacher hissed. I need the bathroom, he mumbled, already heading for the exit. By the time he reached the hallway, the man was gone. But Jordan ran to the school office anyway. He described everything: the bald head, the tattoo near the collar, the stare. The school resource officer radioed it in. 10 minutes later, Detective Taylor was at the school reviewing security footage. They found the man. He'd loitered outside the auditorium for 12 minutes. Hadn't signed in, didn't speak to anyone, then vanished. And he looked just like Holloway. Taylor's hands tightened around the monitor. The Watchers of Gainesville had become a full-blown task force. They were organized, tech-savvy, and motivated. And now they had a target. Within hours, Holloway's face was shared to over 30 local forums. His movements over the past 6 months were mapped by shared doorbell, cam footage, gas station timestamps, and toll road data. Then a break. A tip came in from a delivery driver. Pretty sure I saw him yesterday. He was near Lake Santa Fe, North Edge, just watching. Police swarmed the area. It was remote forested and lined with abandoned fishing shacks. One was unlocked. Inside, cigarette butts, an old cot, and a map with red circles one around Nathan's school. They were close. Susan Miller had started writing letters to Nathan. At first, it was a coping mechanism, a way to keep him close, but now it became ritual. She wrote every morning, folded them neatly, kept them in a box on his bed. She didn't know the search was closing in. She didn't know that 20 miles away, a man was watching the road through binoculars holding a burner phone and pacing like a lion in a cage. Detective Taylor didn't go home that night. The watchers reported movement again near the shack, a black SUV parked at dawn, then gone by 6 a.m. Set a trap, Taylor said. Overnight, a mobile command unit was placed nearby. Unmarked cars flanked the woods. Wildlife cams were re-angled. Drones loaded. Snipers placed on ridge lines. They weren't going to miss him again. January 23rd, Border 12, Peace Mom. The black SUV returned. Russell Dean Holloway stepped out, hoodie pulled tight. He scanned the tree line, then walked into the shack. Within seconds, the signal was given. Go! Officers stormed the shack from all directions. Holloway bolted out the back, crashing through the brush. A K-9 unit chased. The drone above locked on. 10 minutes later, they had him pinned to the ground. Russell was sweating, eyes wild. You don't understand, he shouted. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Where is Nathan? Taylor demanded. Holloway stared at the dirt and whispered, he's still alive. The words, he's still alive, struck Detective Taylor like a jolt of electricity. Adrenaline surged through the command team as Holloway was restrained and rushed into a mobile interrogation unit just outside the wooded shack. He was sweating, hands trembling, but oddly lucid. I need a deal, he said, staring straight at Taylor. Protection. If I talk, you guarantee I don't go down for murder. Taylor didn't blink. If Nathan's alive and unharmed, you'll live to see a courtroom. That's all I'm promising. Behind the glass, ADA. Claire Mendoza nodded grimly. It was enough for now. Russell Dean Holloway wasn't what the profiler expected. He wasn't manic or incoherent. He was calculated, cold. He spoke in patterns, often shifting into the third person when discussing the event. The boy was never meant to be taken. It was supposed to be a scare, a message to who Taylor asked, to the people who ignore the broken, the ones who pretend they don't see kids sleeping in alleyways. I was once that kid. It became clear Holloway viewed himself not as a monster, but as a self-appointed judge. In his delusion, he had a mission to highlight failures in the system. He targeted vulnerable children to make society listen. Where is Nathan? Taylor pressed again. Holloway closed his eyes. I left him in a place sacred. No cameras, no noise, just trees and time. Guided by Holloway's directions, officers were dispatched to the edge of Osceola National Forest, 70 miles northeast. It was vast, wild, and nearly impenetrable. Look for an old ranger station, Holloway said. Boarded up by a dried creek, east of Route 91. He's there, or was 3 days ago. Taylor and a tactical team deployed immediately. Helicopters were brought in. Heat-sensing drones combed the treetops. As they approached the described coordinates, the signal went out. No cell service, no jeeps, just the static hum of pine and wind. The structure was real. A weathered ranger post, long since abandoned, stood camouflaged beneath a thicket of twisted oak and moss. Shingles missing, windows boarded, but the front door unlocked. Taylor motioned for silence. Guns drawn, they entered. It was dark. The smell of mildew and rusted iron clung to the air. Clear right, clear left. Then a muffled sound, movement. Behind a false panel in the floor, they found a hidden crawlspace. A flashlight beam revealed a figure huddled inside, curled in a blanket, thin but alive. Nathan Miller. His eyes blinked against the sudden light. Face pale, lips cracked. Mom, he whispered. The forest echoed with the crackle of radios. We have him. Repeat, child is alive. Nathan was carried out by medics, placed gently onto a stretcher. He was dehydrated, weak, and clearly traumatized, but physically unharmed. Back in Gainesville, Susan Miller, still holding a letter she had written that morning, picked up the ringing phone. The officer on the other end spoke 6 words, ma'am. We found your boy alive. She dropped the phone. That night, Gainesville stood still. Candlelight vigils turned into spontaneous celebrations. People wept on street corners. Strangers hugged. The watchers of Gainesville lit their social feeds with one phrase, he's home. But for Taylor, it wasn't over. Holloway had more names. In custody, he spoke of the other's children taken by people like him. He claimed there were more sacred sites, more abandoned shelters used by an underground network that had nothing to do with ransom or trafficking. They're not in it for money, Holloway said. They're in it for power, for punishment, for silence. Taylor listened, and in his gut he knew Nathan was only the beginning. In the days following Nathan's rescue, Gainesville felt like a town pulled from two realities, joy and dread. While Susan held her son close and the community poured love into candlelit sidewalks and school murals, Detective Taylor sat at the edge of something far darker. The evidence from Holloway's capture was being sifted: his burner phones, notebooks, a flash drive labeled "Witness," and a series of coded maps. Each thread pulled exposed a strand in something far more insidious than a lone predator. Holloway had names. He'd given them willingly, first as leverage, now seemingly for something else: redemption guilt. Or maybe it was still part of a game he believed only he could win. The flash drive was decrypted that afternoon. Inside, 42 folders, each one named after a U.S. national park or remote state forest. Inside each folder were scans of utility maps, handwritten directions, and timestamps. Taylor sat silently scrolling through folder 17, Cherokee. A video file opened. Grainy. A single room. A child maybe 9 years old asleep on a cot under flickering fluorescent lights. A date in the corner on 2010. Jesus, whispered A.D.A. Mendoza, watching over his shoulder. These weren't trophies, they were evidence, records. Logs of children held in various locations, often for days, sometimes weeks. None were labeled with names, just faces, footage, coordinates, and then a handwritten scan. A letter signed by someone only referred to as S. We're not talking about trafficking in the traditional sense, Mendoza told the governor's intelligence liaison. This isn't financial, it's ideological. Detective Taylor paced behind her. They think they're fixing something, purging broken systems. Every victim is a symbol to them. The theory was emerging: Holloway wasn't an outlier. He was part of what he called the Whisper Network, a decentralized, ideology-driven group that saw society's most vulnerable as both burden and opportunity. The Watchers of Gainesville, originally dismissed as vigilantes, were now being brought in for briefings. Taylor stood before them in a private conference room that night. You helped us find Nathan, he said. Now we need your eyes wider. Your methods, your reach, your patterns. We believe this network isn't local. It's national. They called it Operation Pine Shadow. Meanwhile, Susan Miller sat with Nathan in the hospital garden. He didn't talk much. Not about the woods, not about Holloway, not even about the days he was missing. But one afternoon, as sunlight broke through the trees above, he finally spoke. There was a woman. Susan stiffened. What woman, baby? She brought me food sometimes, not him. Her. She said it wasn't my fault. Did she hurt you? No. She cried when she left. Said she couldn't stop it. Taylor heard this from Susan later that evening. The Whisper Network wasn't all men. That same week, agents arrested a man in upstate Georgia who had been flagged by drone surveillance near a trailhead listed on Holloway's maps. In his shed survival gear, a cot rope and a binder of surveillance notes. 3 more raids, 2 arrests, 1 location completely burned to the ground before they arrived. This was a war fought in the spaces between society's attention span, in national forests, on the edge of county lines, where paperwork vanished and cell towers failed. But it was the letter from S that haunted Taylor the most. You will come to hate the system as we did. When the third gate opens, you'll see. The first child returns. The second is never found. The third speaks your name. The team analyzed the paper for prints. None. But the ink used came from a brand discontinued 6 years ago, available only at a niche manufacturer in Oregon. The FBI tracked a recent purchase to a P.O. box registered to an alias, Sarah Halden. The delivery address, Eagle Rock, Montana. Taylor packed a bag. He was going west. The mountains of Montana were as beautiful as they were vast, towering pines, endless rock ridges and wind-carved valleys that whispered secrets long after sundown. Eagle Rock wasn't on most maps. It wasn't meant to be. Detective Taylor's SUV crunched slowly over gravel, the engine a low growl in the icy stillness. The GPS had stopped working an hour ago, but he'd memorized the path. This place had been flagged, tied to a recent ink shipment used in the Whisper Network's chilling letters. He passed a rusted sign bent sideways, Eagle Rock Post Office. Est, 1907. No mail in years, no footprints in days. A wind chime rattled like dry bones above a red door that clung to its hinges. The mailbox had a handwritten label, Halden. Inside, the air reeked of time, old paper mothballs, a trace of dried varnish. Taylor moved like a predator, quiet measured his fingers resting on the grip of his Glock. The back room was a shrine, walls papered with maps, strings connecting photos of children. Some faces had red dots, others black X's. Many were missing names, a few had been crossed out so violently the paper tore. Taylor's breath caught. He snapped photos with his phone and sent them to Mendoza. We're inside a central node, he messaged. Whoever S is, this is her war room. On the desk, a leather-bound journal. The penmanship was elegant, too clean for its content. The Watchers call themselves protectors. But protection is a lie. Rebirth requires fire. Sacrifice. Another entry stopped him cold. Taylor will come. I see his shape in the glass. He spun. Outside, fresh snow crunched under boots. Weapon drawn, Taylor moved to the door. A woman stood just beyond the porch, wrapped in a dark wool coat. Her hair was copper red, pulled back. A scar ran down her neck like a pale white line carved by regret. And on her hand, a ring with a blood-red stone that caught the final rays of sunset. You're not supposed to be here yet, she said, her voice a soft rasp. You, Sarah Halden. Taylor aimed without blinking. She tilted her head, almost amused. They call me S. But Sarah, she died a long time ago. She didn't resist the cuffs. She didn't even flinch. Back at a makeshift FBI staging site inside a converted ranger station, Sarah Halden sat calmly sipping bitter coffee under fluorescent lights. You think this ends with me? She asked. You haven't even scraped the walls of this. Taylor leaned forward. Then tell me, where's the heart beneath the soil, she whispered. Beneath your laws, beneath everything you believe in. She smiled and the room felt colder. You saved a child. Good for you. But one of them isn't what you think. One of them is already waking up. One of them will say your name. Oh, name. A week later, federal agents unearthed a buried crate in a clearing 2 miles east of Eagle Rock. Inside were waterproof documents, coded manifests, and a photograph. Nathan Miller, dated 6 months before his abduction. Taylor stared at the image, his gut twisting. Nathan wasn't random. He was chosen. Spring came late to Florida that year. The air was sticky with pollen, the sun oddly shy. But in Gainesville, the Miller home was beginning to bloom again. Nathan, now a little taller, a little braver, had begun sleeping through the night. He laughed more. He even returned to school slowly, carefully. Yet something still haunted his eyes. Detective Taylor knew it. He'd seen it before in war veterans and survivors of horrors unspeakable. A look that said, I saw the world before you, told me it was broken. The FBI had dismantled most of the Whisper network. Nearly all of the known sites had been raided or mysteriously abandoned. Sarah Halden, awaiting trial in federal custody, hadn't spoken a word since her arrest. Until the letter arrived. It was addressed to Nathan. Susan found it in their mailbox. No return address. Just a red wax seal pressed with a symbol like 2 intersecting spirals. She didn't want to open it, but Nathan took it gently, held it like a puzzle, and broke the seal himself. Inside was a card, blank, except for one line. He will remember when he hears your voice. Susan's hands trembled. Nathan read it again, looked at her and said, I think they want me to talk. Weeks passed. Nathan returned to therapy. This time something shifted. He began to speak, not just about the cabin or the dark, but about the names he'd heard through thin walls, the phrases whispered outside the door, the odd numbers repeated like chants. Then one day he said something that made Taylor sit up straight. There was another boy. He didn't talk. He had burn marks on his arms. He cried without sound. That detail matched a child in a missing persons file from Missouri. They found him 3 months later in a trailer in Arkansas, barely alive. Nathan's voice had saved him. One voice became 2. Taylor was in the courtroom the day Halden's arraignment began. She looked thinner, still silent. But when Nathan was called to testify via secure video feed, her face cracked just a flicker. A twitch. You brought him here, she whispered, venom low in her throat. Taylor leaned in. He brought himself. Nathan stared into the camera. Steady, older. I remember everything. And I'm not afraid of you. Sarah Halden, the priestess of whispers, looked down. For the first time, she seemed small. Years later in downtown Gainesville, a new children's advocacy center opened. It was called the Lighthouse. Inside its entry hall, a quote etched in steel. The world may go dark, but one voice can still shine. NM Detective Taylor stood in the back, older now, gray around the temples, tired but proud. He watched Nathan, now a teenager, give a speech to a crowd of parents, survivors, counselors, and cops. The boy who had once been a whisper was now a beacon. The Whisper Network didn't die with Sarah Halden, but it began to crumble the day a child found the courage to speak.